Ingo did warn me that, while the ones coming into Sedona or Newgrange that have a schedule, like they're coming in on a schedule, those ones are probably safe to try and communicate with.
I discovered Meg Hansen when she checked out my YouTube channel. She's in Ireland. You can find her at metaphysicalireland.com. I was interested because I saw that she was connected with Dick Sutphen. He's a pioneer in metaphysical exploration, psychic research, and past life regression, and he's connected to Ingo Swann. So there was a lot of information there that I thought, okay, I want to ask some more questions. And here we go.
I knew Dick Sutphen and Ingo, and they were fascinated with UFOs. I was not, ever. I was one of those people who was like, Ingo taught me all sorts of things about UFOs, but to be honest, my interest, I used to tell them, like, sure, when one of them parks their Tic Tac behind my car and I have to tell them to move, I'll learn how to talk to them real freaking fast.
Yeah. Right now, it's not my priority. Yes, I know.
But other than that, I have enough humans to deal with. Aliens are... That's great, guys. But I did go with them, once in Sedona. We were trying to talk to this UFO coming into Sedona because we had gotten this schedule from this German scientist showed up. Literally like a flight schedule when the UFOs come into Sedona. Dick Sutphen was good friends with Ingo. I was very close friends with Richard, Dick. I kind of just knew Ingo because he would show up sporadically whenever without notice. And we would try and figure out when he was coming because every time he would come, Richard and I would practice our psychic protection techniques because and our shielding because Ingo could hijack your mind in 1 second. It was just the most amazing. It was fascinating to meet this guy because I was really, who is this guy? Richard and I used to practice constantly before he'd show up, like just psychic protection, psychic shielding, how can we block him from being able to read what's in our heads? So it was so fascinating to me, but he actually taught me a technique that I used later, and I won't say what it was because I think it was classified, and I think it probably still is, but I actually used it later, and it was a big win for a lot of people.
Wow.
So I have to say that, of all the things, I was like, this guy is so weird. And he, and sometimes I would call him Al because he'd be sitting there with a cigar with his feet up on the coffee table. And that was kind of like the last picture of Al Capone. I was like, dude, you're so, but he could get someone in his instant induction where you wouldn't even know what happened. It was just phenomenal.
Okay, so
the way he could operate.
What did he do? Why? How did you know? What would it feel like when he did this to you?
Well, you wouldn't actually know at first. And that's what was so fascinating about it was, later on you'd kind of be like, did he really? It was so interesting to me. Like that was the one thing I wanted to learn. Like, how do you do that? And he showed me a lot. He did. And he, because even though he was there to hang out with, Dick Sutphen and whether he was in Malibu and he was talking about aliens that are among us or in the grocery store or, alien bases. I heard too much about aliens from these two, but and I know there's a lot of people that are very interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials, and I've accidentally fallen into a couple things with, but Ingo did warn me that, while the ones coming into Sedona or Newgrange that have a schedule, like they're coming in on a schedule, that those ones are probably safe to try and communicate with. And we actually did one time in Sedona, and we got back tones, which was very interesting. But because it's indicative of like an old African language, like the tonal languages. But it was very interesting. But I never really, again, I wasn't the UFO girl. I was kind of like, But he said it was safe if you most likely, if you tried to connect with one of the ones that's coming into a sacred site and they're coming in on a schedule, he said that was like if we took American Airlines to Mars on commercial flights. That wouldn't mean that we're sending bad people to Mars. They're just, not going to Los Angeles from New York this week. They're going to Mars. That's fine. I don't actually have any personal ambition to go to Mars.
No.
But I understood what he was saying. Like if they're just bringing from whatever planet to Earth and they're just going to these sacred sites that apparently, then he's probably right. They're probably relatively harmless compared to there's some that he described that he encountered that were more, he described them as malevolent and dangerous, honestly. And he said, and people your average person shouldn't be trying to communicate with them because even he, with all of his skills, and this is the most advanced psychic I had ever met in my entire life. I've never met anybody that could top Ingo's psychic skills. Never. And I have to think that for somebody who knew everything about this space, literally everything, if he couldn't feel that he was safe with some of these ETs, then nobody really is that safe dealing with them. And there is a risk to trying to communicate with some of them.
Well, that's what happened.
It could be a risk for the rest of your life.
Yeah, well, that's what was described. Ellie, his niece, who's in charge of the estate of Ingo Swann, she was trying to put the word out saying, there's this big, right now, a lot of people are trying to do this with no idea of needing any kind of protection. And the stuff that she described he had to go through was actually being in some way harassed and very uncomfortably harassed and trying to figure out how to block it and then asking where are they coming in from and saying another dimension, then, we have to get up to speed with a whole lot of other things before we are able to deal with them one-on-one. And so just opening the door and say, hey, I'm here, come see me. It's like, wait. you don't want to be lunch. Yeah. Okay. you just,
yeah. And if he couldn't get a handle on how to block, then you have to question who is more advanced than he was. I mean, he taught me a lot. He taught Richard a lot, but I'm not 1/100th of Ingo. I mean, really. So, especially with regard to UFOs, since I never really had much of an interest in. I mean, I was kind of like dragged along for the ride type of thing.
Yes, yeah.
Like, it's fine. I mean, and then there was that one coming into Sedona, and we were all like, okay, we're going to try and connect with them and talk to them. And we did get something back, and all three of us got about the same thing, which, we were connecting with using telepathy, obviously.
It was tones. You said tones. So tones like a sound tone or something you're voicing, a vocalization tone. What is that?
But they're they're tones. It's not based on a Western music scale. If you research like African music from tribes,
okay, indigenous African,
long indigenous, yeah, they used this type of. And honestly, I think there were at least one or two languages based on the tones, which is what I told Ingo. And I'm obviously I went to music school. I'm not an expert on that type of music, but I do know somebody who is, and I gave him that person's name, and he's head of a music department at a college in New York. So I don't know. And I also gave that to my senator, Dianne Feinstein, at the time, because I was close to her. Mm-hmm. And I've just been devastated since we lost her because she helped me with everything. And she was the one person who really, made every attempt to understand the research that I've been doing for several years, which is using hypnosis and conversion to counter. How can we use these techniques to counter violence in people? And she was the only one who took the time to understand it. Like, it goes over most people's heads. They're like, well, people are violent because of their beliefs. Well, that's true, but I don't actually care what you believe. I mean, you can believe the sky is green. And as long as you don't want to kill anybody who believes the sky is blue, you can still believe the sky is green. I mean, I'm not worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm worried about is the people who get so angry if somebody shows up and say the sky is blue and they believe it's green, that they're going to kill that person.
Right.
And that's what the research is just taking the volume down on the level of anger that comes up over, in a lot of ways, very trivial things.
A difference of opinion, basically.
Basically a difference of opinion. Now, this difference of opinion can get very, very dangerous. You know, you look at, there's different sets of this. There's like sets of people who were programmed as adults. They're a lot easier to deprogram.
Yeah.
There's sets of people who are programmed from birth. They are very difficult to deprogram because you can't use a regressive technique in this life to take you back to a time where you remember something different when ever since you were born, you were, you know, let's talk about the Northern Ireland conflict. You know, your parents told you or what have you to hate Catholics or to hate Protestants or to, you know, I mean, and that's from an American perspective, our reality box, as Ingo would call it, doesn't include that. Like, we don't think of a Catholic as more important or less important than a Protestant in America, or at least most people don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't even think about it.
No.
But here it's a big deal, you know, because their reality boxes, they can't be like that. And the other side is they can't be like that. And to be honest with you, when you look at the people on both sides of the conflict, they both actually behave about the same. So, and it's interesting to me to look at it, but you can't look at it from afar. You can't look at it from newspaper articles and social media and what have you from the United States. You actually have to go to where it's happening. And I have to say Northern Ireland would be, you know, is obviously is an easier transition for an American than, say, Afghanistan or, Gaza right now. And there's a lot written about the troubles as well here. And I think it's just, again, what Ingo would call, that's their reality box. But this reality box doesn't exist really anywhere else in the world. It just exists in this little tiny, Ireland only has 5 million people. Northern Ireland only has 2 million. I mean, it's this tiny little island of people
mm-hmm.
that have this reality box. And there's still a lot of anger. And there's also, oddly, which I didn't know until I got here, anger towards Jewish people because of the book they believe in. And I'm like, what on? I never even saw a Jewish person here. Like, why would you hate somebody you've never? And why would you want to go around hating people? It's just, to me, that's such a heavy emotion. It's such a heavy, heavy, heavy thing to hold on to.
But it's also identity. You know, it's if you're in a community and it's your social group. If you do not go along with the group, then there are complications.
Oh, yeah. No, and I met a woman a couple days ago who grew up in a town not too far from here that's 95% Protestant, and she's a Catholic.
Oh, boy.
And her parents told her, just be quiet.
Okay, so world conflict obviously is everywhere. It's just a different shade and a different type and a different belief system, but the conflict seems to be universal. In terms of a linear way of looking at it, it's easy to go with the flow. And whatever is in your environment, go with the flow and you're going to be okay. Because anytime you deviate from whatever the community norm is, then you create challenges and all of a sudden you become a target, which is, I think, when we're looking at metaphysics, it's easier to say, I really want to look for UFOs today. I don't want to get into the politics. How's that? Now you know why people go after UFOs and aliens. It's a pleasant unknown, okay? And nobody has boxed it in anywhere. It's still wide open. Anywhere you look at the sky, there could be a UFO. And they don't all necessarily want to target you like your neighbors might. I think there's safety. there's safety in that belief system. And even though Ingo says...
I don't know if there's that much safety in that belief system, but...
You avoided it. Yeah, you avoided it. Well, it's just amazing because the more our neighborhoods and our communities right now are being challenged with horrific acts of violence and completely out of control types of restrictions because the laws aren't really built to handle a state where you have no restrictions on buying weapons. Or if restrictions are, they're very minimal, and that in the United States is a reality.
Yeah.
So, and then how do you expect those people who have guns, who are, okay to have guns no matter what their background, no matter what their age, no matter any of that, and then they're not going to use them? These things are making our lives really complicated and scary in some ways. But the whole world seems to be heating up with those kinds of challenges and those kinds of hurdles for us to look at. And the only way to combat that is to go back to, can you give somebody a solid spiritual foundation where they can see there's more going on here than just the superficial thing of what dress am I going to wear, what car am I going to buy, do I fit with all of my friends and relatives? There's so much more to... I saw a ghost. I communicated with an ET. I saw a fairy. You're in Ireland. You've got all sorts of potentials there with the little ones. There's a way of saying there's more to life than just the basics of I don't like somebody else and I'm going to kill them.
Yeah, and there's a way when you look at those people that become violent over very trivial issues in a number, and also for bigger issues, the people who become violent and they're not in a war are honestly suffering from poor self-esteem. It's across the board. They're in the gutter. Something happened in their life. What I'm thinking is if we can do the research, get a program going that lifts people up and then takes down the temperature. If you could get it right in a place like Northern Ireland, we could take that research and use it. Translators are available for other regions.
Mm-hmm.
See, to test it on 2 million people or on 7 million people is not a huge test, but it could make the difference going forward to, can we use a strategy to lift people up and take down the temperature on violence in other places? Because again, it doesn't really matter what people believe. It matters that they're becoming more and more and more violent over those beliefs.
With access to weapons that make it it's a done deal. When you have weapons that fire multiple shots, when you have weapons that are built to destroy buildings and communities, there's a whole different level of violence.
Well, yeah, and they tend to, like if you look at Ireland, Northern Ireland, where there's really not guns, there's knives. Okay, there's not nearly as many casualties, and I think probably 8 or 9 out of 10 conflicts are all people who know each other. They're not somebody walking into a cinema or a bar or a school with a AR-15 and shooting everybody that they don't know everywhere. These are generally conflicts that the ones you see here are usually a knife. Some of them are guns now, but rarely. It's still pretty unusual. Generally, it's a knife, and how many people are they going to get with this knife before someone tackles them?
Right.
And it's the same thing with some crazy judge in California had said, well, it wouldn't have mattered in Sandy Hook. And I was like, well, if he walked in with a knife, he wouldn't have gotten almost anybody. Somebody would have gotten him down.
Right. Yeah.
So you walk in with an AR-15, those are weapons of war. The family of the person who invented the AR-15 came out and said, no, he invented this for a battlefield. And that's really not, and honestly, if you need, the Republicans saying that they need an AR-15 to go deer hunting, that was really laughable, because I was like, if you're that bad of a shot that you need 35 shots to hit the deer, you really should pick a different hobby.
One of the things I saw that you did put on YouTube was your post-traumatic stress, and having witnessed all the stuff that's going on now as a result of the shootings in Kansas City after the Super Bowl parade with the Kansas City Chiefs. And post-traumatic stress is a huge focus right now with the kids who were, I mean, they had school out for the day, everything was a big, huge orchestrated surrounding to allow the entire community to participate in the parade and the celebrations. And so as a result, then they're caught in the fallout of this. And so the post-traumatic stress issue is beginning to become more, I think more people are addressing it now. It didn't used to be that there were many resources for that. And now it's so,
and there still aren't.
Yeah.
There still aren't. It's if you get diagnosed with PTSD, technically right now, it is a lifetime diagnosis. Your doctor would tell you that. If you come out of a wildfire in California with PTSD, that's what you're told, is this is a lifetime diagnosis. You will have this for the rest of your life. Now, I spent 3 years researching hypnosis techniques to try and get rid of the PTSD, because I have to say that is the fastest way to suicide there ever was. With some people with PTSD, they take it out on other people, and a lot of people internalize it. No matter which way you go, it's bad, and it's horrible to live with. It's absolutely terrifying. I spent 3 years trying to get rid of the PTSD. You know, when I moved to Ireland, the thought was, well, get rid of the environmental triggers to start with, because every time there was wind or smoke or, you know, my lupus symptoms would be set off by the PTSD. And then I would get sick on top of the fact that it was driving me crazy. So I moved to Ireland, got rid of the environmental triggers. And then one day there was a fire in a hotel I was at, and it totally set it off. But then I combined two Milton Erickson techniques, and I was able, the next time there was smoke, I felt nothing. I would smell it, and it didn't upset me. My heart didn't race. I wasn't feeling sick. I was okay. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just temporary, so I won't tell anybody. And then when there was a lot of wind, I was okay. And then there was another incident where there was smoke, a lot of smoke from someone's house from a fire. And I didn't feel scared anymore. And apparently what combining those two hypnosis techniques created was, it took this incident, the Woolsey fire, from the part of my mind that felt like every time there was smoke, it was a new emergency and it was setting off every trigger in my body. And it put it in the part of the brain that says, oh, well, that happened in the past. And it was a miracle, because I don't have the triggers anymore. I put it online just to see if it would help a couple other fire survivors in California. Mm-hmm. And I did hear from some people that it took them a few times, but it does work. And I've heard from other people that said it didn't do anything for them at all. So, and that's normal for hypnosis. Probably about 25% of people will get hypnosis immediately, and they'll fall right for whatever. And then, you know, about 50% will be helped by it in total. And then there's probably another percentage that it just doesn't, you know, unless you're in an individual session, or it just won't. It won't hurt them, but they just won't. Yeah. It doesn't do very much for them except relax them, which honestly I don't think is a bad thing either. I tell everyone when I do the live psychic archaeology talks at the different mind-body experience events, if all this does is relax you, if this whole planet would just relax a little bit more, we'd all be in a better place. Yeah. And when I put them on Apple Music, and I'm memorializing techniques that Richard and Ingo taught me that are safe to put out there. Yeah. But I'm also trying to help people to relax. And they're binaural beats, the background music, you know, and it just takes you through a guided meditation to a psychic archaeology target. And that's safer than if someone wanted to try a past life regression or something. But I've thrown in the healing techniques I learned from the Native Americans and some of the, you know, different techniques that, again, Richard and Ingo taught me. I feel like I'm memorializing this program so that it's always there. You know, there's some recording of some of this stuff that maybe we should have done in the 90s.
Well, it's
and we
huge.
Never did.
I mean, it's huge. I had post-traumatic stress for about 10 years after being attacked. I had somebody came in my apartment. And so if there's somebody standing next to my bed, my husband at the time, when he was standing next to my bed, I could feel that, and I would wake up and scream. And, just that autopilot. And I got out. I was okay, but it was also a metaphysical. It was one of those things where I was in two places at once, and thinking faster than I can possibly think, and having more strength than I ever had. And it just everything all came together. And the thing was, it was a past life that I had this involvement that basically I know now as Qigong that helped me activate that element. And then when I was in a position to actually harm the person who was trying to harm me, the angel beside me said, "Karma, karma." And I'm like, you were here all along.
Yeah.
You were here all. And so it's like, do not, because if I had, it was a 3-story drop to a cement, so it wouldn't have been a happy outcome. And then it would have been my deal. But it was explained to me that as a defense, I was okay. But once it turned to offense, then I would be perpetuating the same thing that came forward. And to end it was to allow that to go, and basically in a way of saying all debts are paid. And so each time we react, we determine how the cycle goes forward. And that was a big lesson in all that. But like I said, there's still post-traumatic stress with that, because that autopilot, that fight or flight, that safety is thrown away, and you don't have it. And all of a sudden, you have your body, your mind, your psyche has to figure out, okay, how do I get back in balance? How do I understand that I can make myself safe again? And that like I said, about 10 years, because it was a reflex. And there are things that you, like you said, can't control the wind. You can't control when somebody stands next to you in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, but uncomfortable to the degree that you're completely ready to go, to scream at the top of your lungs. Those kinds of things are, I think, each and every one of us has something that can tie us. When you're saying you can't take them back far enough when they have these social conditionings to hate somebody else, that I think our past lives are bringing some of that forward to say, all right, it's time to let it go. It's time to deal with it. So if you go into a past life regression, you might be able to identify something, a tool that will help you release it in this lifetime. I see that you do a lot of different kinds of work, and past life regression is one of the things that, that Dick Sutphen was into.
However, if you're going to do a mass deprogramming of a group of people via media, if you're going to do it individually, then yes, you can do a past life regression. But a past life regression is not going to apply to a mass bunch of people being deprogrammed at one point, at one time.
Right.
Using one media strategy. So, and you could actually probably do a little, you could probably cause some problems if you did try that. On a mass level.
I don't think you can do a cookie cutter approach, period. Everybody's not one size fits all.
But everyone is one size fits all when it comes to lifting people up. And when it comes to taking down the temperature on violence. I can do that one size fits all. I can't use past life regression as one of the methods to get there. On a mass scale. On an individual scale, yes, I use past life regression a lot. In fact, Richard, again, Dick Sutphen, he contended that 95% of the major issues that you have in this lifetime are a continuation from a past life. So we do have to go, if I'm in an individual session with somebody, I am going to take them back because I do want to see, was there an incident in a past life that is causing the level of emotional upheaval that this person is experiencing in this life?
I learned that from my experience. Not only did I have the angel saying karma, but the memory of that body, the movements that it took to free me enough to tap into that incredible amount of energy to be able to throw somebody on the other side of the room And this was not anything I'd done before. It was new and it worked. So yeah, it's like, okay, I was Superwoman, but at the same time, also knowing that that isn't the answer every time. And I wasn't sure that the person did have a knife, and he did. There were so many variables that happened with that. I learned so much about myself and my responses, my reaction, what I needed to be held accountable for in terms of then looking at other people and saying, did you bring this on yourself? All these kinds of things that we get into that we do not know until we actually experience it firsthand. Did I make myself a victim? What, and then am I assuming everybody else is a perpetrator because they're all men? Those kinds of things. When you get into, and like what you're talking about being in a fire, I was in a flood as a kid. So my mom was traumatized by that because it came up and 20 minutes later it was gone, but the devastation was there. Everything gone, Those kinds of things, you find out where are your strengths instead of saying, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's like, what can I do? And you go down the list of, okay, this is what I can do. These are the things I can do. Yeah. And you build yourself forward. Meg Hansen, MetaphysicalIreland.com. A quick break.
When you get the PTSD, it feels as if everything that you've ever been through in your entire life comes crashing down on your head. And when you do hypnosis with people with PTSD, you realize that the people who get the PTSD as opposed to the people who don't, who were in the exact same wildfire, okay, or the exact same war circumstance. Yeah. The reason, or it seems like the reason is because there was another traumatic event in the person's life previously. And then they go through this wildfire, and then that's what triggers the PTSD. But the people who don't get the PTSD seem to not have as much trauma in their past. So you have to have at least, it seems like you have to have some other, at least one event in your life that was traumatic, and then something happens and you get the PTSD. Something major happens and you get the PTSD, as opposed to someone who doesn't get it. I can understand why they say it's a lifetime diagnosis, because it took me 3 years, and I've been doing hypnosis for 30, to figure out how to get rid of the triggers so that I don't die of the lupus symptoms because of it being triggered by PTSD. Okay, so the Woolsey fire, just reframe that for a little bit, not the whole thing, but for an idea of you lost your home, the community, what happened? Oh, we just woke up one morning to the flames had jumped the 101. They were on it was very clearly on its way to us. And it was an extremely dangerous situation. All of Malibu had to be evacuated at the exact same time, which is impossible because there's only one road. And the Paradise fire had just happened, and they lost a lot of people in that fire. They were gone. And here we were. Everybody was getting on the same road in one direction, and had the fire changed direction, we would have been like Paradise with all the cars backed up on the PCH. So it was terrifying. It was like you were trapped. You couldn't get out. It was horrifying and terrifying. And then you call around to all your friends and say, okay, my house burned down. I just got confirmation. Is your house still? No. Over 1,500 houses, like everybody's house. It's like, okay, where are you going to stay? And we really didn't get that much time to get out. So I got, literally nothing out. Mm-hmm. And I had to wake up my landlord. I had to go check on some neighbors about, and that's it. You had to leave. And it was terrifying. I came back in to help get some animals out. The place was still on fire for a few days. The whole place, the whole area. Mm-hmm. Just, and I saw the house, let's see, it burned on Friday, then November 9th, and I went back in. I saw the house November 11th, and I took pictures for all my neighbors. And it was too much to see just everything. It was just a pile of ashes. There was nothing left. So... You said animals. You went back in for animals? yeah, for animals. So to help load some horses. And then there were some donkeys, chickens, a pig, some roosters, bunnies, and some, I don't know, there were just animals everywhere.
Okay.
That was okay. It was, I love animals. So, but I have to say the hardest thing for me was just seeing the house was just, it was too much. So.
How long had you been there?
A long time. I lived in Malibu for 22 years. I hadn't been in that house that long, but I was there for years. I mean, it wasn't like I had only lived there a year or something like that. I had lived there for years.
Well, it was a foundation.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. It was everything. I mean, it was kind of like, and it's just in moments, it's amazing how everything could. But then you look at everything as things happen for a reason. I believe what my friend Richard used to teach in the Sedona Psychic Seminars, that, we have a pre-birth planning session, our blueprint before we come to this life. We all planned our lives. And, and this is obviously what I chose. And, I wouldn't have gone to Ireland or Northern Ireland to look at research or to do anything had I still had all my stuff in California, because who could afford to ship all that stuff? I had so much stuff. I mean, my goodness, I forgot how much stuff I had. It was just, I never would have made it here to do this. And now I almost wonder, should I have come here? Because I did all this research knowing that Diane Feinstein was, she was with me on this. Mm-hmm. And then now she passed. Of course, she was 90, but I just loved her and I thought she'd live forever. But I understand, I was heartbroken. For me also is now I don't have anyone in the Senate that's interested in this research. I know the president is aware of it. I haven't heard from them if they would want me to continue it or if they want me to drop it. So I'm kind of like, do I keep going? Because I've been working on it for years. Or do I just change to something else, or just focus on my hypnotherapy practice and forget about that for a little while? In my intuitive development seminars, which will be this year as well on Zoom and also in person. Mm-hmm. But it'll be here in Ireland. I actually like it up here. I like Northern Ireland. I love Giant's Causeway. My dog likes to walk at Giant's Causeway, so I got a year pass so I can walk him there a couple times a week. And I'm trying to also understand the healing prospects of these different, they're kind of known as portals or power spots over here. Mm-hmm. And I know NASA has some research that says there's certain points on the Earth that have a stronger connection with the sun. And there's some other research that's not NASA, that's of scientists that have looked at the different stones in certain stone circles that are positioned in such a way to be batteries to one another. And I wonder what the ancients, what were they going for there? Because I've sat in some of these, like when I first went up to Giant's Causeway and Mountsandel here, I had a really bad lupus rash on my face from stress. Mm-hmm. And the butterfly rash. And I literally just walked around Mountsandel and then went up to Giant's Causeway and just walked up and down. And I came back and I had no lupus symptoms and no rash. Everything just vanished.
That's huge.
Like, I wonder if there's anything to be said for the healing properties of these places, because I was like, wow, that's different.
I think you've just answered why you're there.
It's just, I mean, but is it just me, or should I drag everybody I know there that has an illness and see if they get a little better?
You need proof that more people can do that. But I do think the healing aspect is huge. And there are portals. There are places that do show ley lines where the energy is it's amplified. And I have experienced that with my nightlight stuff that I do. There are places where the energy is amplified, and if that brings a healing element to it, there are going to be different levels of responses. But it sounds like with your experience and having it immediately address a very obvious issue isn't that convenient, because it's obvious, you can see it, you have results, then I would go forward with that.
It was amazing to just have it, like, all of a sudden I had no fever, no lupus rash, no symptoms at all.
Yeah.
And for 2 weeks. I mean, I was like, wow, that's interesting. That's different. That's better than any pharmaceutical drug I've tried.
Yes. I think that definitely there's more to that, and you wouldn't be there if there wasn't.
Yeah, well, this year passed to all these sites is only 85 pounds a year. That's the cheapest drug I've ever taken.
I was going to say, no doctor, no hospital, no drugs. It's the whole nine. It's earth and healing earth energy. And probably when you're talking about the sun amplifying that, there's definitely, they were on to something, and they did these things for a purpose. It wasn't just to have some kind of a religious rite. There's more to that we have lost in our history, in terms of all of the healing abilities that they had access to, and the beliefs that empowered those abilities. And that there's so much that we have, like with Ingo. He was the most, as you said, the most talented psychic you ever met. Well, he's also saying that we have these abilities. We need to start using them. Yeah.
We just don't know, like, what is in the other 90% of our brain that we don't use. I mean, people, you can call it the Akashic Records, the collective unconscious, whatever, but there is what these people were able to do. I mean, people wonder, like, oh, how did they move the stones? Well, PK and sound frequencies probably, this whole idea at Newgrange, they tell you, oh, they put them on boats. Well, a stone that weighs tons is not going to be on a little boat. It's going to sink.
A tiny boat, right. Yeah. Okay, gravity.
There's also this dang thing called gravity.
Yeah, duh. Okay.
But you don't say that, when you're over there. You just go, okay, yeah, that's different. My guess is they were using, they were using their psychic skills. They're using sound frequencies, because sound frequencies can make stones lighter. And I know that from Ingo and his research, and he did a lot of research with sound frequencies and ELF, and he gave that to Richard too. I don't know where it is now. Whatever research I had written down, unfortunately, would have been in the black suitcase in my closet in Malibu. And it's all gone as of November 9, 2018. But, and I, thank Southern California Edison for burning all the houses down. But, Ingo and Richard did a lot of research with sound frequencies, and I actually helped with some of that research. But I just wonder, like, is that how the stones got moved to Sleeve Gully? And the highest, passage tomb in Ireland is in Northern Ireland, and it's literally, to climb to this thing, it's like the stairway to heaven. I mean, I think it's 2 kilometers straight up. I mean, it is literally just, you get halfway up and you go, okay, I guess I got to keep going. You have to wonder, like, how did they get those stones all the way up there? But then you think, well, sound frequencies make stones lighter, and with PK, and then there's the good old, I had this little girl in a past life regression in one of the mind-body experience events with her mom, and she comes to me and she says, they were giants. They picked them up. Adorable. But to be serious, I've gotten some very interesting information out of the different psychic archaeology audios, because I'm curious if I get enough people to go back in time and do either a past life regression or remote viewing or spirit communication, and just go back to your last significant lifetime or using remote viewing, going back 5,000 years or 5,200 years at Newgrange, and just see what you see there and what's going on there. Because the more we can learn from, I don't think they were that primitive. I think we might actually be a little more on the primitive side as far as the psychic abilities. But I agree with Ingo that governments don't want people to really know this stuff. And funny enough, I don't think teaching people remote viewing in the United States is a threat to the government. I really don't. Most people don't get it really well. I have to be honest. I mean, after going through thousands of people, I understand that the protocol that Ingo wrote, and it's phenomenal because he told me he wrote it so that anyone, literally anyone, could do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like he could take anyone off a battlefield or anyone from anywhere and show them remote viewing, and they would do it, but to varying levels of talent. And I think, most people, when you teach it in the United States, it does take a considerable amount of practice for a lot of people. It's not like your past life regression or your automatic writing that everybody gets right away. But what I was surprised about was, because I was very good at it in the United States, but I wasn't good at visuals. Like, I couldn't read an envelope on your desk from the U.S., anywhere in the U.S. Sedona or Los Angeles or New York, we tried everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or Florida, Hawaii. No. But I came to Ireland, and it was funny. I came to Ireland, I think it was the first week I was here, I was doing a remote viewing experiment from Newgrange, and I was able to read an envelope on someone's desk and tell them who it was addressed to and the return address. And I used to never get that level of visuals. So it was a surprise that changing where I was physically, and I don't know whether that is that we're closer to, that Ireland is closer to some significant, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but it does seem like the detail I could get here. So then as a test, at the last mind body experience in Dublin, I taught a remote viewing workshop, just showing people how remote viewing is used to help find missing people, to assist in locating a missing person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a room full of people. There were some people from Ireland, some people from the U.S. I had a nice girl from Nigeria, a couple tourists from Australia. I believe there were 2 reporters in the room and a couple police. What was so amazing was the detail, because we taught remote viewing in Sedona for years. And it would take us 3 days to teach it, right? It would be the end of the psychic seminar, because if you did it on the first day, people weren't as apt to get almost anything.
Yeah.
But if you did it on the 3rd day, after they've been meditating and doing past life regressions and automatic writing and other methods of connection, that, then they would get something in the remote viewing if we waited until the 3rd day. So I did this in an hour in Dublin, okay? With people, most of the room had never heard of what remote viewing was. And I had a missing person chosen at random in an envelope. That was the second part. The first part was the live target. I will say about 80 to 85% of the room got their live target, exactly where they were, even if they weren't where they were supposed to be.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we went on to this missing person in an envelope. Okay. And I didn't know who it was because I stuffed 5 missing people in an envelope a week earlier. The people who had been missing for a long time in Ireland. Okay. So not someone who could just be missing and alive. I mean, these people have been missing 20 years. So, because they're easier for your first time. So I put, in 5 separate envelopes, you've got 5 missing people. And I had somebody at the thing just pick one of the envelopes. And then I moved the other envelopes out to the side, and I put that one up on the board, and I said, okay, everybody, link your chakras to that envelope and just tell me everything you get. And I did a special process to do that. And the detail, I mean, he's, buried by the sand dunes on a beach near, I mean, it was, the yellow tent, the car, the guy he talked to, the guy involved, a couple he talked to, the woman was American, she's not alive anymore. Oh my goodness. At the level of detail, these people came, it was staggering. I mean, compared to teaching the same thing in the United States. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting that for some reason, Ireland has some kind of ability for people to connect to their own psychic abilities, more so than other places, or at least other places I've been, because everywhere I go, I'm always interested in just checking things out.
Well, the folklore of Ireland, I mean, there's a history, a rich history of metaphysical, spiritual aspects, elements that doesn't exist in the United States at the same level.
I think that's true. But I mean, from what I'm seeing it's true. And in fact, in a couple of the past life regressions separately in Cork and Dublin, the psychic archaeology regressions, I had two different people in those different places tell me that they came out of the past life regression and they said all of Ireland is a portal.
Mm.
Is that interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't heard that again since, but I'll tell you what I thought was really interesting was the triple spiral at Newgrange, the famous triple spiral that's etched into, the 5,200 years later, we still have this triple spiral. So I had in the Newgrange past life regression that's on all the digital music services, I had that question, like, what does that triple spiral represent? And if you go to Newgrange, they'll tell you it's, life, death, and the after. And I never knew what it represented. I always kind of looked at it and went, wow, I wonder what that represents. Mm-hmm. So the common answer for this one from all of the past life regressions, because that's the first one I put up about a year ago, and the common answer is the 3 circular islands of Atlantis. Like, who would have ever, I never knew that Newgrange would have had a relationship with Atlantis, or and so now I have to redo the Newgrange one to ask, what was the relationship between Newgrange and Ireland? What was, what is now known as Newgrange and what is now known as Ireland to Atlantis and the people of Atlantis? I mean, because these are people who don't know each other in different places around the world. I mean, they don't.
I was looking very quickly as you were speaking and looked up the triple spiral Newgrange, but what I also picked up was the spiral petroglyph, and then they also argued that this is representative of a portal to the spirit world.
I think it is. You actually feel it when you're at Newgrange. I feel it once you pass the standing stone that's in front of Newgrange. The 3 standing stones are like right in front of Newgrange. Once you go past that towards the monument, you feel like you've entered a different space. Mm. Now, there's another spot that is significant that's a little bit further back on the lawn where there's a field shift. And you can feel it if you're sensitive to it if you walk slowly across the lawn. There's a standing stone that they moved all the way in the back of the lawn. And if you walk from that standing stone toward the ones that are near the monument, about halfway, you feel a shift. So, and it's a little bit like the shift in Sedona at Bell Rock, when there's that spot on the path where if you have hair on your arms, it'll stand up. Otherwise, if you're like me and you don't have hair on your arms, you'll get goosebumps if you stand in that specific spot. Yeah. But they have a spot like that at Newgrange too. Okay. It's very interesting to me because I just wonder, like, why that is, or what that's, mm-hmm. what is the potential of that?
Well, to me, that's also a dimension shift. So that you are getting a clue that something could change, whether it's your time element, either lose time, gain time, because I've had experience for sure where I knew that I had gained time. And I was able to travel somewhere. Should have taken 10 minutes. And it was more like 6. And there was fog around my car. When I got out, and I thought that was a clue to me. The residue, it was showing me something had shifted in my environment, in addition to the time, to give me an idea that, this is interesting. As you said, interesting. What do you do with it? Well, then I know it can happen. That's it.
I just wonder if there's something else about it, because I I wondered out loud to Diane once. I remember I was like, I saw 2 Tic Tacs. This was so long ago. But I saw 2 Tic Tacs coming into Newgrange. It was probably 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, right? And I stopped on the road because I wasn't at Newgrange. I was like on the road behind it. And I stopped and I was like, wow, just 11 a.m. on like a Wednesday, And I'm looking at it going, geez, and there's 2 of them. Okay. And then there's a point where it would disappear. And then and that same point, the next one would disappear. And then I was wondering, first of all, I called Richard. It was like the middle of the night in Los Angeles. And I was like, you wouldn't believe this. But what was really funny was this guy stops behind me on the road because, there's nowhere to get around anyone in Ireland. These roads are so tiny. And he says, are you okay? And I said, did you see that? And he says, oh, yeah. He's like, as if they come every week. I'm like, he goes, oh, they're very welcome. And I'm looking at him like, all I'm thinking is, could you imagine if they flew that close to houses in Malibu at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday? Yeah, NASA's phone lines would light up like a Christmas tree. But I'm like, okay. But then I was wondering, if there's that point where it's a field shift and they can just, it's out of my vibrational range, like I can't see it once it passes that point.
Right.
Okay, does that mean that if I'm standing in Newgrange, that these aliens could be standing all around me on the next frequency that I can't see and I don't know?
Yes. 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 And sometimes they'll let you know it. Other times they won't. Yes. They will stand right in front of you and you cannot see them because we aren't equipped with that particular vision element. And not only that, if it's a different dimension, they could pass through and we won't know it. But yes, I've spoken to one right in front of me and it was very almost, concrete, knowing this one is in front of me. I can feel it. I can sense it. I cannot see it. And I know it isn't a physical, but the telepathy is there and the joke is on us.
Pretty much. Like, but just remember the Irish welcome. Oh, they're very welcome here. I'm going, okay.
You're one of us now.
Well, I do think there's some truth to what Ingo was telling me about them being amongst us. Mm-hmm. And I think that they can shapeshift. And I think that there's some truth to there being bases, these alien bases on Earth and underwater. And I think there's a lot the government's not telling, which is not surprising. Again, I really think that there's a lot in it for governments to keep people stupid about a lot of things. They've done a great job in Ireland. I've got to tell you, they have no freaking education system, that country. I think they trim off probably 3 years off of a basic American education. And that's unfortunate because the people who fall for programming by people like Putin, people like Trump, people like Hitler, are people who are mostly, there's some people who are very smart that fall for the groupthink, but they're mostly the uneducated, not so bright kind of, and they start this whole thing and they get really riled up over things they don't even understand. So, it's not helping anybody for any democracy to not educate their people really, really well right now. It's going to be a huge problem. I mean, that's why the Russian disinformation in Ireland is taking off like wildfire because people aren't thinking for themselves.
This is history because it's always been a problem with the educated and the non-educated, and you've always been able to make someone else the enemy. That bias has been around for a long time within religious communities. There was a certain amount of education you were allowed to have, but if it didn't go align with the church, then it didn't count.
Yeah, and right now in this world, when we're facing a major crisis politically everywhere, like literally everywhere. Education should be every democracy's number one priority. Get people as much education as possible so when the shit hits the fan, you've got enough people thinking.
Well, that gets complicated because then you determine everybody has their own idea of what should be taught. And you go back to, once again, fighting over the details of who's going to teach it, who decides what should be taught. I mean, the best thing I think that we can do in this time is remember we are all human beings. We are better than our politicians. We are better than our politics. We are better than anything that teaches us to hate another being, whether it's a physical human being or an animal or a plant. Anything that teaches us hate is not in our best interest because we have this planet, and if we hate something about it, we will lose it, and that's counterproductive. That's basically self-annihilation because we have to go forward on the planet.
Yeah, and then you've got hate is self-annihilation anyway because if you hate, you're attracting more hate. So
it compounds, yeah.
And when you look at karma, what you put out, you're getting back. So what you do to other people, you're getting back. So what Ingo and Richard taught me was that you can send people their own karma back. Just send it back to them and send them on their way. Release them from your mind and body. Just send them on their way. Just go, I hope you get your karma back. Goodbye.
I hope you get your karma back. See, that was the thing I learned in being attacked and thinking, okay, I can prevent this person from hurting anyone else. Right now I have the upper hand. I have more power than I know what to do with, and I can affect justice, whatever, vengeance, blah, blah, blah. All I was thinking, I'll keep you from hurting somebody else. You can't, there was nobody else going to be caught up. And the thing when it said karma, it was like, no, this is between you and that entity, that person. It's done. It's gone. It is not your deal. Yeah. So it was saying to me, it wouldn't help me to try to hurt someone who had tried to hurt me. I was okay. I was going forward. But if I stepped back into creating more karma, then I would be perpetuating the thing that put me in the position in the first place. So it was like, that was a huge, huge lesson because my automatic response was, here, I can fix this and I will, take charge and be powerful and get rid of this threat. And that was completely a revelation of no, you do that and you take on karma. And I'm like, wow.
And you have to be so careful with karma because the blowback from karma, from what I've been told, is just, you just don't want to go there.
Well,
just send them back their karma.
Yeah, let that person go. It was just, there's no way I could ever have imagined that would be the way that it happened. And so it's like I still take away from that each of us has more power at our disposal than we realize. And violence as a response isn't helpful. It's basically perpetuates it. You don't want to reflect violence back. You want to upgrade and, like you said, release it, let it go. And I think Ingo and Dick both had that same awareness that we are so much more than our physical body. This other element that's part of us has a lot of power that we still have capped and we have to tap into.
Well, you are your soul, not your physical body. So this is your physical body for this time around. But you haven't had the same physical body for all of your lifetimes. And so your soul, you do have to concern yourself with karma from what I've learned.
Yeah.
You do have to keep yourself so that you come back with light and love and, and that the contracts with other spirits to come back and learn. Because we're all here to learn to, get past our fears and to love people unconditionally and to receive love unconditionally. But to get there, you do have to concern yourself with karma and your actions and your words and how you are, just as other people do. And what they do on their journey will, apparently they will answer for it going forward. But you won't answer for their part. You'll answer for you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's that the thing of for post-traumatic stress, knowing that at some point that is setting a pattern, and to heal, you have to change the pattern. And that's why it doesn't work the same with everybody, because those emotions from the time we're born are different. We have different communities. We have different social backgrounds. We have different things that are programmed, not only from the time we get here, but from what we bring in. So being able to identify some of that and get rid of the tapes that we're brought up with that are just kind of like thrown at us, and we assume those, we absorb those without knowing we can say no at the beginning, going back and undoing some of those tapes, and then saying, okay, how can I retain my power? How can I regain my ability to choose for myself and not just accept that this pattern is mine forever? I don't think there's a forever anything in terms of, you've got PTSD, it's going to be with you forever. I think we are better than that. And we have the ability, but we may have to work a little harder than we want to be able to find that key that loosens it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's too many people in life that are not going to work hard to make themselves a better person.
Okay, yeah, well, that's okay.
I can't tell you how many people I've seen with cancer who would rather have cancer than try hypnosis techniques. Who would just rather suffer from the pain and and it's just, why don't you, if you could just open your mind slightly. No. Okay. Well, then.
Yeah, it's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
And unfortunately, if you, same thing with high blood pressure, you can use hypnosis techniques to lower blood pressure. That's how I've dealt with it since I ended up. One of the things I got from a Woolsey fire was high blood pressure. Never had it before in my life. I was always low blood pressure until the Woolsey fire. Then it was high, but now it's low again. I tell people, you could try this. It might not work for you, but it won't hurt you. You could try this. And some people I think they're just attached to their illness, whatever they gain from it. I can't figure it out.
And that is perplexing.
So,
but I also know that in some cases, it is the position they're in their community, their family, their environment, that if they go against the grain, and if this is something that's novel and outside of their comfort zone, in that situation, it would be threatening to the other people around them, which is sad to say. I mean, that they're willing to die rather than try something unique and novel and not in alignment with the community. But they risk being outcast, ostracized, shamed for doing something that the community that they're in would disagree with. And that I've seen that you can't put your own support system at risk by doing something that foreign, because then you lose the foundation. And that when you're in a vulnerable space and that foundation goes, then there's that fear of dying alone or of being alone, and that's a big thing. Loneliness is huge. That's I think one of the biggest challenges we face right now, and why people are addicted to social media and addicted to other kinds of philosophies that are incredibly disempowering and at this point disastrous for our planet, but because of the fear and loneliness. So we're fighting some other challenges right now that I hope we will overcome and pass the hurdle for becoming better humans all across the board.
Yeah, I do think social media does unfortunately lend itself to, it gives people a sense of some company when they're home during a pandemic. But honestly, the pandemic's over, and the best thing for loneliness is to visualize pink and to breathe and to get enough sleep, and then to go out, go to the coffee store, go to the nearest tourist attraction and walk, get movement. Movement actually makes a huge difference in depression and sadness. Moving around and being around people.
I would say get a pet, but the pet is like, okay.
I have 2 horses and a dog, and they're the best thing in the world. And I have to say, if you want to meet people, if you're lonely, the best thing in the world is a dog.
Yeah. You'll remember the dog, Sam. You won't remember the people. That's okay. Everybody does it. Okay. Just get over that.
Oh yeah, everybody at Giants Causeway knows Bailey now. I'm forgettable, but Bailey, he's a hit.
That was the first thing I found out when we went out. Everybody knew the dogs. Oh, that's Bailey's mom over there. What's Bailey's mom's name? I don't know. Bailey's mom. You know, it was just that. And yeah, I have cats. They don't force socialization, but in terms of animals, not everybody's okay because you have to be dedicated, okay? And all animals have a routine, but it is one of the things that is a very good help with loneliness is to have a pet or an animal that you can visit. If you don't want to take care of the animal, visit an animal, and you'll have some benefit too because you'll make their life better. But we've covered a lot of territory. I want to go back with you and Dick Sutphen. This is something that you felt driven to do, and when you lost Dick, it was I think it gave you a redirect, and you're in Ireland right now, and I think this is probably going to be a whole new chapter for you, even though it's not exactly what you had intended with Dianne Feinstein as a support. There's a reason. There's just, you wouldn't have had that healing experience and all these other new developments without having moved in and committed.
I knew I had to move. Richard and I had thought about doing an intuitive development seminar near Newgrange. And the reason that was this German scientist, the one who had come to Sedona with the timetable of when the UFO flies into Bell Rock, but this guy went around the world measuring power spots. Okay. Mm-hmm. Energy at power spots. And he had 3 different instruments, and, measurement instruments to do this. And he said that, because I asked him, I said, well, where is the most powerful energy in the entire world that you've measured? And he said Newgrange, that he's measured. Now, he had been to 8 or 9 different spots. Mm-hmm. So that's not to say that Newgrange is the most powerful place in the world, because there could be one that this guy didn't measure. But it was interesting enough to me and Richard that we wanted to try doing a psychic seminar at Newgrange, just to see what the difference would be between Sedona and Newgrange. And that's honestly where I got the idea of doing the psychic stuff in Ireland. And I thought, well, if I have citizenship, like I already have an Irish passport because my grandmother was born in Ballyshannon, one of Rory Gallagher's cousins. So I had the Irish passport anyway, and I said, well, I'll try it. I want to do this research anyway, and I want to do this psychic stuff. And then I got introduced to the mind-body experience people, and Freddie, and they're just fantastic. Everybody at those events is fantastic. It worked out well. I'm grateful to come up to Northern Ireland to kind of see the differences. I can't say I haven't run into a couple of thugs on both sides of their conflict, because there is still this underlying, from the Troubles, there's this underlying current that's honestly scary. I mean, they're not after Americans, so it's not anything against me, but it scares me the way some of these people behave, just because they were born with this reality box that we never saw in America. I mean,
right. Yeah.
So it's phenomenal to be here and experience it personally, because that is, again, the only way I can do research to counter it, to counter people who are programmed from birth, as opposed to people programmed as late teens or adults. People programmed from birth are their own. It's the most difficult set in the world to counter. And so it is actually if I was going to continue doing this research, this is a really important time for me to be here. It's also, as my friends pointed out, they were like, do you really want to move home before we find out who the next president is? So, I I said, so what you're telling me is the second week of November this year, I'll be maybe not be able to get back to New York. I gotcha.
Yeah. Just don't play your cards too quickly.
My cousin was like about that extra bedroom.
Well, you've got horses, though. It sounds like where you're at, you've got a really beautiful setup.
Yeah, and I had my horses in Ireland, and now they're up here in Northern Ireland. They have a half acre here, which is a nice little turnout, and they have 2 stables. It's a very simple setup. It's a tiny little 2-bedroom cottage and a couple of stables in a small field. It's nothing fancy or what have you, but I really wanted to move to Coleraine. And the reason I wanted to move to Coleraine is because Coleraine is one of the more troubled areas, as far as, it's County Londonderry. It's a border county. Coleraine is not on the border. So where I am is on the border with Antrim, County Antrim. It's an area that still has violence. Like there was still violence against the Catholic Church a month ago or so. In this area, like not far from here, like within a few miles. So in order to do this research, I need to understand those people. But it wouldn't help if I moved to the nicest area with the most educated people, because educated people in nice areas are not going to come forward with their prejudices very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
This research will take years, because people who with university degrees and who are working in corporations or what have you, they know not to come out with things that, even if they think them, they know not to come out with them because they're not appropriate, maybe in front of whoever. Whereas people who are uneducated and they don't really think about what they say. They literally just come out with anything. And that's who I need to do this research, is I need to understand this underlying current of hate so that I can counter it. But the only way to counter it is to understand where they're coming from. And it doesn't take much to pull it out of them over here. So, unfortunately, it makes it a little bit dangerous for me sometimes. But if you're going to do this type of thing, you've got to be ready for whatever you have to face. So I'll probably be very thrilled if the president will allow me to move back to New York at the end of the day. But I mean, maybe not. Maybe it'll just go fine here. I don't know. It's a very pretty, because it's near Giant's Causeway and it's near Mountsandel, Mountsandel is the oldest known settlement in Ireland, and it's very pretty. It's on the River Bann, and you probably know a lot about the healing power of rivers and the healing power of trees, and it's the forest on the river, and there's this clearing, and it is just spectacular. So another beautiful place in Ireland, but it's worth your visiting if you want to come.
I know. I'm thinking it sounds gorgeous. Metaphysicalireland.com. Meg Hansen, a quick break. Metaphysicalireland.com. If you tap into the folklore, there's another element to this, and that is hugely powerful. And in addition to the tic-tacs that meander through, okay?
They're very welcome here. Remember that.
I know.
All I could think of in my mind was when I called Richard, it was the middle of the night in Los Angeles, because, Los Angeles, of course, is 8 hours behind Ireland. And so it's 11 a.m. in Ireland, and I phone Richard, and he's still up. He's writing a book, and I'm going, oh my, you wouldn't believe what happened. These 2 TikToks come into Newgrange. I was like, could you imagine in Malibu if 2 UFOs flew into Malibu really close to houses at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday? I don't know that the sentiment is going to be, oh, they're very welcome.
They're like, oh my gosh, yeah. No, there'll be fears like, oh, help.
What the F is going on here?
It's a military something. Yeah. Just recapping your connection with Ingo and Dick, and you weren't all about UFOs, but their own sense going forward. Why are they here?
Why are they here?
UFOs. Yeah. What's it about?
What I've gotten from, and I fell into a conversation with some extraterrestrials at one point, and I got that they feel that the nukes are polluting the entire universe, the nuclear weapons that each country has.
Mm-hmm.
They want to disengage everyone's nukes. Now, I took a very neutral stance to this because I'm not really sure that would be a bad thing if someone got rid of all of the nukes. Especially if they want to start now in Russia. But that was kind of that they felt they needed to intervene on Earth in order to save like their planets too. That there's something that we're doing that's impacting them negatively and that they need to correct it. That's the insight that I gained. So other than the ones that, as Ingo said, come into the places like Sedona or Newgrange and they're on a schedule and they just, if they're bringing people, whatever Planet Airlines to Ireland to see Newgrange, I guess those kinds are relatively harmless. They're just far more advanced than we are, these different extraterrestrials. Because we're not able to take American Airlines to the moon yet.
Not yet.
I have a few ex-boyfriends I'd like to send, but
not yet. Yeah.
I'll buy the tickets.
Thank you. See ya. Bye. Find your karma.
But that's a one-way ticket.
The reason I ask is because the groundwork has been laid for us to continue interaction, contact, and it's ongoing.
Yeah.
No matter what anybody does, it's not stopping, it's ongoing. And so the purpose, the point, the reason, it would be nice to know if anybody has figured that out, because it doesn't seem, given all the contact that we have, that we're all on the same page with what is actually going on in the purpose.
Yeah, and my biggest concern is that Russia's trying to, Putin tried to make himself head of Earth in one conversation. And I'm like, oh, no. I mean, geez, could you pick anybody else on the Earth would be a better idea. Literally anybody.
I don't think that whoever decides to appoint themselves as a representative for the planet is going to get anywhere with the ETs. Because for one thing, they're supposedly a whole lot more intelligent than us. And so anything like that is pretty much a moot point of, okay, yeah, nice to hear you. Next.
Well, the thing is the other thing is that they're reading everything. When you deal with them, it's not like a board meeting where or a conference meeting where if you're at Universal Music Group and you're sitting in a meeting with a bunch of people and someone presents a singer-songwriter that you think is the worst thing you've ever heard, you're not going to say that in the meeting. You're just going to kind of look at the person and go, yeah. You wouldn't generally come out and say that. And if someone asked you what you thought, you'd probably say something like, wow, that was really something. When you're dealing with ETs and not humans, you can't hide what you're thinking about something because they're reading your minds and your mind, your thoughts, your emotions.
Yeah, Ingo knew that.
So
Ingo knew that.
Yeah. Yes, he did. And he taught me that. And he taught me actually a lot about how he communicated with ETs. And again, I was kind of dragged along for the ride because I wasn't at the time and I'm still really not. Again, if they park their Tic Tac behind my car, I will get after them with my telepathy skills. Don't worry. I'm equipped and I know how to talk to them because Ingo taught me, but I reserve that for the day I have a problem with them and they annoy me.
Okay, real quickly, what can you disclose about how to talk to them?
I probably just don't want to. First of all, I don't want to encourage people to try to talk to them because it can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, I don't know that it's a good idea when we do have a foreign government, specifically Russia, probably China as well, looking at different research. And it's the same reason somebody came to me at Mind Body Experience in Dublin and said, will you teach the shielding and the protection methods? And I said, no. I won't do it because I can't guarantee there's nobody in the audience from an adversary government.
That's a huge issue.
And Ingo told me, like, back in the 90s, he said, and he told me and Richard, he said, they actually send people into psychic seminars in America to try and learn more psychic skills to other governments. Mm-hmm. But thankfully, at the time, the Russians were just sending people who were Russian, so it was pretty damn obvious who you were. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like, it wasn't somebody that looked like or sounded like an American, so it was actually quite easy to know that you had one there and to tone down the seminar accordingly. To the point where everything you learn here is going to be what you could find on the internet. I'm very careful now because I do realize that there is someone tipped me off that there's some missing research that Russia thought they had, but they didn't have. And I was like, well, that's probably because the Soviet Union did that research with the Czech Republic. And I would bet you that the research he's looking for is in Europe. It was Czechoslovakia that did that research. It wasn't the Czech Republic at the time. It was Czechoslovakia that did the research with the Soviet Union. That was their program, and our answer to it was Stargate. Mm-hmm. Psychotronics was their program, and our program was Stargate, was the answer to it. And so, but I don't want to give up anything that could be classified again because of the current conflict. Yeah. And I just don't know what is classified and what's not classified. So I'd rather just, if I'm unsure, I just don't go there.
What I think is interesting, one of the most extreme experiences I had with psychic intuition and saying, don't go here. I went to a UFO conference, the only one, and saw a big, nice, gorgeous white owl flying in the sky. My husband and I were out walking the dog, and there's this huge white owl. Okay, well, all right, that's a clue. When I went there, the guide said I needed to leave at a certain time. And so I was there. What was interesting was that going into the room where the general room where they're all gathered, the bar, everybody was smoking. And I thought, which actually validates the research that says most people who look and see UFOs are either out on a smoke break or walking their dog. I thought that, I was like, well, that really validates that. The other thing was when it was time for me to leave, I had taken some pictures of the group outside. They were taking pictures. And so I took pictures. I turned my camera to take pictures of the people who were taking pictures. And I immediately, is like, all of a sudden I'm crying. My eyes are just, I cannot stop my eyes from tearing. Everything's salty. And it was like, leave. Because I was supposed to leave as I took the picture, and I took one more picture. I was like, and immediately, but it said that it was a hostile audience. And so there were other people in this group that obviously didn't have everyone's best interest at heart, might have been doing some research, whatever. But that was my own stuff that said, enough, you're done, leave. And so tears streaming down my face. Departed. But that's the thing, that we all have protection in our own way. Yeah. We have protection. That's my protection. And I was with that one, I listened to the karma thing, said, okay, fine. But when I was pushing the envelope here and said, well, okay, one more picture it was like, no. So I didn't take the picture. I knew it. Okay, that was my.
But it's good you pay attention to your protection. Because how many people don't pay attention to their intuition when they say, just don't?
There's a reason that we get those little cues and clues. And I never would have thought anything like that until later on. I'm reading this information and saying they've always got disinformation agents. They've always got people who are spies or gathering information, intelligence. And there's no need to know who, why, what. It's just to know that it's present. And you don't have to be the one with all the answers. Sometimes it's better not to know. And that was one of those occasions where I did what I needed to do. I was there to kind of cover it and see what was going on and meet somebody I'd done an interview with. And I had accomplished that. Angela was one of the ones who, the first Stevensville sighting there of the UFO, she's deceased now, but I had done an interview with her talking about this event coming up. And so I wanted to connect. And she was one of the first wave of COVID deaths. It was like her and her husband. And I'm like, oh, man. But she took a lot of flack. And the person who was in charge at that point did let her go because what she was doing was just unnecessary. And that person was trying to make a name and has since had her own sighting and decided maybe that she did the wrong thing. But we live and learn. So it was just a whole, a whole different element at that point of me having up close and personal experience with this, and then knowing there's more going on there than we realized that we ever even, like when you're going to some place for the first time and you don't expect somebody there not to be there for the same reason. I'm going for the entertainment. They're going for information and rubbing elbows and collecting and taking notes. And that's part of our environment. And that's what we have going on right now. When you're looking at the scraping of all the data to be able to get people's information, social security numbers, birth dates, death dates, all that, and then posing to be able to maybe possibly fleece somebody, which is happening on a regular basis because they have that information. And, we live in an entirely different world where we are exposed more than we have any idea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Upping your psychic skills is in your best advantage.
I think it's the most important skill set you can advance at this point in history. There is nothing more important than developing your intuitive abilities right now. Yeah. Nothing.
Yeah. I believe Ingo believed that. And that's why he left so much of his work available and accessible to the public. And ingoswann.com.
Yeah. Well, curiosity killed the cat, though. He really was just, no matter what happened with the ETs and how they drove him crazy until the day he died, he still went, he was still testing techniques all the time for shielding and blocking. And he was just the king at this because what's that quote that says, only the person who goes too far can possibly learn how far you can go. Yes. I think that was about him.
Yes.
He literally took everything, even when they supposedly closed Stargate. And, here he is, shows up in Sedona, and he's testing the government research and taking it further with Richard. They never stopped. Never. It didn't matter whether he was getting paid or not. He was literally just, this was his passion, and nobody was going to take it away from him.
Yeah.
And, and he didn't care how far he went. He wanted to know how far you can go. And he wanted to know if you could go farther than that and farther than that and farther than that. And what can we actually do or not do? It was fascinating to know him, to meet him. He knew, again, he was friends with my friend Dick Sutphen. I was just kind of like the girl who got dragged along for the ride. It was a fascinating ride, I must say. I've never met anybody like him since, either of them. Richard was probably the most famous past life regressionist. He had done for years and years and years. I think his book, You Were Born Again to Be Together, was probably the first book based on hypnosis to sell over 1 million copies in America. It was a Simon & Schuster book in the 70s. And, and he was probably the first person to hypnotize somebody on live television and, including Good Morning America. So the two of them together were just a powerhouse of knowledge in this space, in this psychic space. And I know Richard did a lot of things a lot of people didn't get, and Ingo did a lot of things that a lot of people didn't get. And it was just so fascinating to kind of watch, even if there were stuff that I was kind of like, why are they doing this again and again? But then you'd see like what the outcome was, and you'd be like, oh, wow. Like they really, they develop an idea, try all sorts of different strategies, and then get to, but that's really where I learned how to research, is how to try all these different strategies and, combine different techniques and take Native American techniques and look at what, the Russians had done or the Chinese or, how do they do this? How do these people do this? And how can we take techniques and combine them and make them even, more powerful? And so, and more, detailed or more, it was just so interesting. And, Richard and I were close friends for 25 years until he passed away in 2020. It's interesting how the world is not the same since, but I feel like they gave me a good enough foundation. And now I'm just trying to memorialize some of this stuff, especially since, people aren't as open to healing. Some people are closed-minded and not as open. And so I'm memorializing it in these recordings, these audio recordings, some techniques that are easy to get, just so that your average person someday, when they open their mind, can take a look at this and say, oh, this might actually work. I had a friend who had a stroke, and I was able to, and he was in a coma, and I was able to, using one of these healing techniques, he woke up, he came out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they work. This stuff really, really works. But again, some people will just think this is absolutely crazy.
Doesn't matter. As long as it's available and people begin to try it, word of mouth, it draws the person who needs it. That's the way we work intuitively. And there's a I think, understanding that the more you advertise, the more people will find it. No, just because you advertise doesn't mean you get the right person. It's organic. When we actually tune in, we show up and we are where we need to be. And that's the way this works. All you have to do is put it out there. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And and if it only helps a few people, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to have reached them and to have them have a positive outcome. For me, it'll make me sleep better at night. God forbid, I get killed doing this research, or I, have a horrible time with the lupus. I'll at least rest peacefully knowing that I took some of these things that are not classified, that are just easy for beginner techniques that people can use, and memorialize them so that they're available. And it's not to say nobody else is doing research like this, because I know that there's other people, and they're, I'm sure there's very qualified people, but it's just that I think everyone has their own angle towards and their background of who they learned from and where they've taken the research and what they've done. I think it's important that people write books and make audio recordings or whatever you're compelled or drawn to do, because it'll help other people moving forward even long after you're gone,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for people to connect with you, the website, metaphysicalireland.com, the YouTube channel, I've checked that out, and also Facebook. You're available on Facebook. At this point, what's next?
For me, I'm going to have a couple intuitive development workshops upcoming on Zoom. I am going to speak at Mind Body Experience in Dublin in September that I know right now. I do have a practice here in Northern Ireland now, but I can also help people via Zoom. But other than that, I have my research kind of on hold at the moment just because of Dianne Feinstein stuff, which I'm still trying to process. How I just adored her. She helped me with everything concerning everything that had to do with the government. And that's from my part in the negotiation to access Osama bin Laden, right on down to the EDD in California during the pandemic. She wasn't even tasked with state issues, but she did it for me anyway. She was just a superhero.
When you mentioned Osama bin Laden, wait a minute, Osama bin Laden, you just kind of threw that in there.
Well, I wrote a book about it. It's on Amazon. It's called Always Face the Hounds, the negotiation for Osama bin Laden. And it's something I fell into. And of course, I'm originally from New York, so I gave the other governments a nice hard time at first. I did that. I have another book as well. It's called What You Don't Know Can Kill You. And that's about how people are programmed, mind programmed by cult leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim Jones,
yes,
David Koresh, Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
and it goes on to a current political figure. I think we're still waiting for Mexico to pay for the wall. Oh,
yeah, it's going to be a long wait.
At least a few lifetimes, I think.
Yeah.
So I did that one years ago, and now I'm literally just trying to get settled in Northern Ireland and move forward with however things go from here. I would be happy if the president wants me to continue this research that I was kind of working on, with Diane there, but we'll see.
Yeah.
You just don't know where people's heads are on this. It's not a very hypnosis, conversion, and persuasion is a hot topic, but it's not something that a lot of people really understand the power of these techniques and what good can come out of this. And when people are programmed, Ingo used to say the way in is the way out. So we can do this, it's a question of trial and error. It's a question of a good strategy. But we can do this. The United States definitely has the people to strategize and implement, and we can do this. So, and we can take down the level of the violence, and we can lift people up that are in a bad space. I really do believe that would be a huge help to what governments and what normal people like you and I are facing in these days. Other citizens that are just becoming more and more and more violent. We have to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the time is now.
And it's everywhere in the world. It's not just America. I mean, it's worse in America because people have guns and they're walking into places and shooting up people they don't even know. But Ireland's become a lot more violent in the last couple of years. You're seeing violence all over.
Yeah.
And you're seeing political violence too, which is, it's crazy because when I was growing up, you'd never really think somebody going to kill you for liking a different politician than them. You know what I mean? That's crazy. And nowadays, that's unfortunately how some people present themselves. And you have to wonder, can we give them a couple other tools in their toolkit so that violence isn't something they feel is ever justified or ever an acceptable route for a solution, because it's not. No, violence never solves anything.
Well, it's a vicious cycle that we're looking at right now. And some of these things will change. We're going to see it. And at the same time, I'm going a different direction by focusing on the spiritual aspect, the metaphysical aspect, and the others who are around among us. We can't see them. They're here. And the people who do see them say, why can't you see them? So that's what I'm trying to work on. We're going to see more. And I just, that's where the topic is heading us. And I think when we're really focused with our intuitive abilities and psychic skills, we are better humans, because then we realize we are connected, all of us connected. And that's a better start.
Well, I mean, it would be great if more people would get offline and go out and connect. And I mean, just with the trees, the rivers, the grass, and the humans around, walking around as well. Because maybe being so connected on the internet is too much.
The internet never sleeps.
It doesn't, but it's also, as connected as people feel, it's causing a serious disconnect, because the people are spending their time on the internet and not leaving their house and going to see other people and having face-to-face interactions. And that humanizes other people, and it encourages conversations with other people who might be a little different than you.
Mm-hmm.
And that might actually, or it would, help a situation, help someone who might otherwise become violent against people they don't know, to understand that people are different from them, and that doesn't make them scary or bad, that they're interesting. Other people are interesting.
I'm going to recommend your website, metaphysicalireland.com. But for people to connect with you, is it Facebook or where's the best way to reach you?
Meg at metaphysicalireland.com.
Okay.
MEG.
Okay, and I think you need to go back out and investigate the energy where it cured your lupus, or at least put it on a little bit of a hiatus.
I've kind of been looking at different theories from different people, and there's scientists and archaeologists here who have different theories that, often contradict each other. But it is very interesting to be here and looking at that. And I'm learning more, though, from the past life regressions, from people going back in time from their last significant lifetime at, say, Newgrange, or Mountsandel not out yet, but Connemara was a big one. That was a very interesting one, where people got a lot of information. And I'm asking about, healing, and who are the healers in your community? Do people go to a specific place to be healed? How are they healed? And the reason I'm asking those questions in the past life regressions is to try and get a little more insight into what they were using. Or is there something to the idea that certain stones were put in certain places facing a certain way with a different combination of stones that has healing properties all put together and acts as a battery in a circle? I mean, that's some of the stuff I've heard over here. Now, whether or not that's true, I'm not a scientist. But again, I can say that, one walk through Mountsandel and Giant's Causeway, and my fever was gone, my lupus rash, the butterfly rash was gone, and and I didn't have any symptoms for a couple weeks. So I don't understand how that could be or why that is scientifically, but it sure made me feel better. I would wish it for everybody who has any ailment. If it's that simple to get rid of, go sit on that stone over there. Well, there'd be a line for the rock. It's an interesting experiment, this whole thing. I'm hoping the research will be done by November. Depending on who's the president, I might hopefully be able to move back to New York, but we'll see. I don't know that agriculture is going to approve my horses, which would mean I'm still stuck here, because I've owned Jewel for 20 years and I've owned Anya for 19. So, they're coming. Wherever I go, they're coming. It's definitely an experiential trip. I wish Ingo was here. I think he'd have a blast. I think he'd love the veil is so thin here that you walk into Fornox, the tomb near Newgrange. And I took a Facebook video, and one of my friends in Malibu sends me a message. She says, "Do you notice there's two apparitions in your video? Veil is thin here." They were very friendly. They're friendly spirits in Fornox. Like, they're happy to have the company. They told me they were worried that the government would close up the tomb and not let visitors in anymore. And they would be so sad because they really love the company and they love showing people around. I was like, oh, okay. And then I told another girl, I met her up at Newgrange. She was from New York. And I said, you've got to go to Fornox. And, she took a Facebook page, a Facebook video and put it on her Facebook. And I looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, she has two apparitions in her Facebook video too. I was like, they don't leave anybody alone. They're like so happy to see everybody. And that's kind of, you're going to have a lot of them here in Ireland. It does seem that this is a spot for that.
Meg Hansen, metaphysicalireland.com. Links are in the description for the show. IngoSwann.com. And Dick Sutphen's audios are still available. Thanks for listening.